Top 10 decks for May 2023. Just wanted to thank everyone for coming out and liking my last video. It was the most liked video for the week, and there were significant changes that happened this week. Big winners and losers. Two decks that exploded. This one right here and Sera Control. And largely, I saw Electro Sandman not being played as much, as well as Patriot not being played as much. Now, Lizard and Sandman are not being played as much, where Jeff and Enchantress are almost everywhere. So we're going to talk about the new decks and go through it. And again, thank you for liking the video. We're going to be doing these every week. This deck came out of nowhere. It is quite explosive. Tons of synergy. Now, there's a couple cards here that can get dropped on turn 6. And I think the reason why this deck blew up is because of Sandman not being around, because this deck likes to play Miles Morales for 1, Stature for 1, and something else on turn 6 for a massive amount of points. There's a lot of flexibility with Jeff and Nightcrawler to get into locations that are hard to get. And then as far as triggering Miles so that he'll cost 1, Polaris will do that, Jeff will do that, and so will Nightcrawler. Now, a lot of people that do not have Jeff are running Cloak, and this deck just pops off. It is so much fun. Now, a lot of people don't have Jeff, a lot of people don't have Darkhawk, a lot of people don't have Stature. Darkhawk is Series 4, dropping down to Series 3. My prediction is that's going to happen about 3 weeks. But Jeff is a brand new card, like I said. 6,000 collector tokens, and he is going to be there for a minute, and so people are running Cloak. This deck just works. Enchantress is amazing now. You can play her on turn 3 or turn 4 sometimes just for points. They may have overdid her a little bit, but this deck is just amazing. A lot of explosive power on the final turn. Another deck that has just exploded. This deck has been around for a long time. This is Sera Control. A lot of different versions of this deck. But I also think that because this deck runs Killmonger, next week we're going to be getting Nebula and Kitty Pryde. And decks that run Killmonger are going to be a thing. So the idea of this deck is to play Sera on turn 5. Typically you want to snap there, and then you just drop your hand on the final turn. This is a long known archetype that has been around for a bit. Hitmonkey make it quite a bit better. Before Hitmonkey, people played Armor instead of Hitmonkey. There's a couple versions of this deck. Some people will run Jeff instead of Polaris. I'm a huge fan of Polaris myself. It's one of the few things that sometimes can interfere with Galactus. But this is a standard build. I've made several videos about this, but there's so much surprise in this deck, whether it is on turn 6, blowing up Nova with your Killmonger, or blowing up something with Shang-Chi or Enchantress, or a location, or this huge surprise. Boy, Scarlet Witch can get so many cubes. There's a ton of synergy with Mysterio and Bishop and Hitmonkey. Mysterio basically is 3 cards played at the same time, so that gives 3 points to Bishop, and it effectively makes Hitmonkey a 6. You can play turn 4 Mysterio and Hitmonkey, and that's basically 6 points from Hitmonkey, 4 points from Mysterio. That's 10 total points. This deck is bonkers. I also want to say that there is a version of this deck that does not run Angela and Bishop, and it runs Jeff and Leader running around. This is going to be a thing, and I predict that this is going to be a very popular menacing deck, specifically because of Killmonger next week. Sera Surfer. Talked about this last week as being a very strong deck. Still a very strong deck for putting out tons of power. It does have a small amount of control, and it has a more favorable matchup against Galactus because it runs cards like Goose and Polaris. And it's, again, the same idea. Typically, you're locking out a lane putting Juggernaut behind there. And then if you don't have enough power in that lane, a turn 6 turn 6 Silver Surfers pushing power to that closed off lane. Very explosive. I did not play this deck this week, but it is still killing it out there, and this is a completely viable deck. And I also feel like a lot of people have most of the cards to these two decks right here, whether it's Sera Control or Sera Surfer. Last week I said that Sera Surfer was just a better version, but now Sera Control is just blown up, and Enchantress is a very powerful card. Just wrecking nerds all over the place. Another deck that is still very good is going to be Darkhawk Devil Dino. And I predicted that the Cosmo decks were going to become more popular, and that is absolutely true because that can shut down Enchantress. But notably, you're going to want to place your Darkhawk and or your Devil Dino behind a Cosmo lane. That way they can't be blown up by either Shang-Chi or Enchantress, and then you can, on the final turn, place your Mystique. Also, a lot of the builds were running, let's say, like Doom, and that largely was a function of Sandman and having a better matchup against Sandman. But now that Sandman is not being played as much, the She-Hulk has come up, and there's insane synergy with Moon Girl turn 4, and then you can soak, the power on turn 5, maybe skip turn 5, and then you can play your whole hand on turn 6. Multiple She-Hulks. Quinjet, of course, synergizes very well with Moon Girl, and this is going to continue to be a very viable deck. Of course, I said Darkhawk. My prediction is Darkhawk will be dropping from Series 4 to Series 3 in probably about 3 weeks. We'll have to see. They usually give us some advance notice. Now, other decks that are doing very well is Doomwave, and this deck is running Enchantress now instead of White Queen. I feel like this deck has been around for a minute, and the idea is on turn 5, playing Wave, soak up 2 power into Sunspot. That way you will have a She-Hulk you can play for 2 on the final turn, and then some other card, one of these in here in the back row. So you're going to be able to play 2 cards where your opponent may not be able to play just 1 card, right? That's the idea of Wave. And the idea with these Wave decks is to kind of slow down the decks that want to dump their hands on turn 6, notably the decks that I talked about before this. Now, my prediction is that this is kind of like a good cards package here on the top. My prediction is that the Death Wave version, which is the Destroy package, with Yondu and Bucky and Carnage and all of that, and Death, will pick up steam if Kitty Pryde and Nebula go wild in the next week. So I think that this is going to be a deck that is going to be trending upward, along with Sera Control, along with Sera Surfer, all because they play Killmonger. And this deck right here can be a bit more explosive on turn 6. Again, turn 5, play Wave. If you've blown up enough stuff, in theory, on turn 6, when your opponent can only play 1 card, you could be playing Doom for 4, She-Hulk for 2, and Death for 0, while your opponent can only play 1 card. Very popular deck. Galactus is still a thing. I don't really need to talk too much about Galactus. I believe this is just a standard Galactus build. Play rates for Galactus have been stable, although I've noticed that the cube rates have gone up a bit. I believe that the cube rates were lower for Galactus because of Sandman, and now, because there's a lot of control in the Sandman decks, I suppose. I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe it was Leech. I don't know. But this deck's cube rate has creeped up. Play rate remains stable. Also, another version of the deck I just wanted to point out, I'm a big fan of Jeff. Basically, this replaces, I believe this replaces Yondu and Wolverine and Chavez with kind of like the Professor X Daredevil Jeff package, which gives a second win condition with Destroyer. As far as Thanos decks, the most popular and effective Thanos deck currently is going to be the junk version. Also running Enchantress. Enchantress is everywhere. This is fantastic. I have absolutely been blindsided by Valkyrie a couple times this week. Such an impactful card when it works, for sure. I gotta say that Valkyrie is one of those cards that in theory I like. I just personally have not gotten it to pop off as much as other people have. So let me know what you think about Valkyrie. It's just one of those things. Then there's also still the options of a good cards control build list. This is largely a list that runs around Storm, Jessica Jones, and then with the final lane kind of locking it up with Spider-Man, and then being able to get power into the closed off lanes with Captain Marvel or Doom. Also running Enchantress. The other thing too is that Lizard now is a more situational card and typically is played with other decks that have synergy, like Enchantress with Lizard, or Zero with Lizard, or Luke Cage with Lizard. But it is no longer, Lizard's no longer a plug and play card. And the card that seems to step up the plate is Jeff, the Land Shark. Lastly, Hela has been making a resurgence. Now, I have found that this deck here is a little bit unpredictable, and I'm gonna be playing this deck a little bit more this week. I feel like I've tested a lot of Hela in the past, and I personally did not like the amount of variance. I felt like it was like a deck where you were playing and retreating and playing and retreating, or playing and hoping and praying that your Swordmaster or the Blade is not targeting your Hela, and then you're just going off on turn 6 and blindsiding your opponent. So I just wanted to acknowledge that Hela is a thing. Probably some decks that I missed. What is working for you? What deck do you think is going to blow up in the next week? I'm calling that any deck with Killmonger is going to continue to be very strong through next week, with the addition of Nebula and Kitty Pryde back to the game. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Always, thanks for watching. Keep on gaming. Bye for now.